That's a very fair question. I mean, after all, the ministry is a public role. Whether it's a big church or a small church, it's a big crowd or a small crowd. The reality is you're standing in front of people, and that can be a very gratifying experience. It can be a very prideful experience. It can be an egocentric and vainglorious experience, but not for long. Not for long. Not in a real church. Now, I know there's some celebrity preachers out there, and I don't mean that as a compliment, especially preaching a prosperity theology and all the rest, but they're not really building a church. And, you know, I did an interview with a major newspaper just this week about one of those ministries. And, you know, they kept talking to the church. I wanted to say, look, I know you have to call it a church, but as a biblical Christian, I'm not even going to acknowledge that as a church. So, but where you do find a church, you're going to find God's people perfectly capable of keeping you humble. And I don't mean that sarcastically or condescendingly. I mean it gratefully. Hopefully I mean it humbly. In 1 Timothy 3, the Apostle Paul says that the pastor, the teaching elder, should be the husband of one wife. Well, that's a start. Because if a man's faithful as a husband to his wife, he's going to be humble. Because I don't know a man, honestly, I'm not saying I don't know a speaker. I know speakers, but I don't know a man that I know up close who will say, I am just the most fantastic husband you have ever met. When it comes to husbandry, I'm a gold medalist. I never hear a Christian man say that. Every Christian man I know is saying, I'm learning all the time. I'm growing all the time as a husband. I love my wife more than ever before. I thought I loved my wife when I got married. Now I consider, after all these years, how I love her more. Hopefully I've learned some things about being a husband, but I just honestly, I've never met a godly man who's my age or older who said, this husband thing, I got licked. You want some lessons? You come and talk to me. Why? It's because marriage is humbling. And marriage is humbling. You think you got this thing figured out, and then you realize over the long period of time, it gets more glorious, but you also grow more humble. You grow more dependent on one another. I mean, my heavens, at this point in my life, I would say if I didn't have Mary, I wouldn't know where anything is. I wouldn't get anywhere. I mean, I'm just completely dependent. She makes so much of my life happen, and that's humbling. And I can think, well, let's put it this way. I cannot imagine that I'm standing on my own feet, as if I got all this licked. And then God's people will do the same thing. But before I get to God's people, your children, when you have children, they'll do the same thing. And you say, does that mean by their behavior they humble you? Sometimes, yes. But what I mean more than that is the experience of being a dad is profoundly humbling. Again, I have some good friends who say they were ready to write a book on being a father when their children were in elementary school, but now that their children are in high school, they do not feel equipped at all to write a book on being a father or a parent. I understand that. I fully understand that, because you understand that being a father means you're entrusted with more than you can handle, buddy. This whole experience of being a father is very humbling. And yes, your children will humble you as well, because your children are not impressed that you're pastor of the church when all they want you to do is read them a book and tuck them into bed and take them on a walk and go out in the backyard and play. That's very humbling. It's very healthy. But God's people, yes, God's people are good at humbling people. Because in the most amazing ways, and I don't mean in a premeditated way, but in the most amazing ways, it's stunning how often God's people humble the pastor. First of all, one of the ways as a preacher you get humbled is when you think you have just preached the best, most powerful sermon you've ever preached in your life, and somehow the congregation isn't coming to the same conclusion. Or, this is also humbling, you think you just got up and it just didn't click. You were doing exposition, you were preaching the word, you were faithful, but you just didn't feel wonderful about the sermon. And then months later, people come up to you and say, you know, the Lord brought that text to my heart. That sermon really helped me. I was really struggling with this. And then you're humbled and saying, I'm not even good at knowing when I was good. I'm not even good at knowing when I was helpful. That's very humbling. So I will say that a sense of humor really helps in ministry, and God's people will require of you a sense of humor. And then you also need to surround yourself not with people who tell you constantly how wonderful you are, but people who are sharing the same calling and involved in the same work, with whom you can be very honest, and they'll be very honest with you. So all that, what a great question, Lucas. And whether in Springfield, Virginia, or anywhere, God's people are going to be the same. And there's just glory in that.